Welcome to Rock That Relationship, a podcast about all things relationship with Corey and Tracy.
Now let's get real and start creating relationships that rock.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rock That Relationship. We are here today talking about falling in love, as we've been talking about all season. And we are so excited to have on Lindsay Andrews, who is a codependency expert and educator. And we're going to ask her all sorts of questions about codependency, interdependence, and how much space should we have and boundaries should we have in that new relationship. And we've been waiting to talk to Lindsay to be able to kind of find out all the details of all of this stuff. And then, situated in particularly in Tracy's and my experience, as we usually do. So Lindsay, we're really glad to have you on. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Corey and Tracy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, awesome. Maybe we could start out by just asking you a little bit about how you got into this work.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times these stories start by a personal journey, and that is how it started for me. I am a recovering codependent, and I learned about that. I was married for a long time, 18 years, and was a codependent in that relationship and got a divorce. And a lot of things started coming together for me. Realized that I was bringing a lot of unhealthy patterns, behaviors to my relationship. And ultimately, it starts with myself. And I realized, I got to start looking in the mirror. I got to start investigating myself a little bit deeper because I was just constantly on that hamster wheel, trying to figure out my life, why things weren't working. Why didn't people just do what I want them to do so my life could be perfect? And it was just a constant frustration. And so really that journey for me started seriously about 5 years ago, where I got a therapist and I decided that I wasn't using my voice, and I wanted to use my voice to help other people, other women specifically, come to some awareness, help them through this. Sometimes we're just floating through space and we really don't know what it is we're dealing with. And so I really wanted just to be a voice. Podcasts were a really big deal for me as I was learning about my own codependency. And so I really wanted to kind of keep spreading the love, if you will, to help women have that self-awareness and to help them with some tools and resources to get through that.
That's awesome. Can you explain? So you said you were a codependent yourself. What do you mean by codependency and emotional addiction? Are those the same things or different? And
yep.
How do you?
So yeah, I can start off by kind of it all goes back to childhood. You think about where we got all this stuff, right? We all have, issues in our adult lives. And a lot of times what we can do is go back and see, okay, what happened in childhood? Why did I become who I am, as an adult? And so I kind of like to start with, the definition of codependency. I think that's probably a first place to start, which is the chronic neglect of self in order to get love, approval, validation. It's also a way to get self-identity through another person. So, emotional addiction is part of codependency, but I think for our conversation today, codependency is the umbrella, relationship addiction, emotional addiction, they all kind of fall within that same realm. So for me, and for others that struggle with codependency, there's a lot of different factors in childhood that kind of create that dynamic. There's really two, I would say, that stand out as strongest to me that are common factors to lead to codependency. So one is dysfunctional family dynamics. So if you grew up in a household where you had dysfunctional patterns that you were witnessing, whether it was addiction, whether, someone in your house had a mental illness, or maybe there was abuse present, that all can contribute to codependency. And so in these environments, individuals learn that they need to prioritize the needs of other people over the needs of themselves. And so that's kind of a very core component of being a codependent is kind of looking outside. How can I caregive? How can I take care of other people, to feel safe, to really just assure that safety. And then the second thing is really about childhood trauma. So if you've experienced trauma in childhood, that can also lead to, so abuse, obviously part of it, but we kind of develop these behaviors in response. It's like a coping mechanism. So again, suppressing our needs, suppressing our emotions in order to survive and in order to gain that approval from anybody, like, and your parents, mostly primary caregivers. So, kind of learning to sort of behave, walk on eggshells to really kind of create that safety within self. So I can give you some more examples, but like that's kind of like the core of where it comes from.
And does that impact relationships early on? And are people like, how there's attachment styles, right? A person's avoidant or they're anxious. Are people kind of, if you're a codependent, you're just codependent with kind of everybody, or
pretty much?
How does that work?
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, I kind of just took those tools, those strategies that I had as a kid of coping and just like, okay, I'm an adult, so I'm going to keep doing those things. I have a boss, I'm in a work environment, and it's like, okay, well, that boss kind of becomes the parent in a way, kind of the primary caregiver. So yeah, you end up taking those behaviors with you in all kinds of relationships. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a partner relationship, but in terms of like attachment styles and things like that, typically like, codependents can maybe fall more on the anxious side, and they end up maybe trying to, I would say maybe not trying, but they likely to attract maybe a more avoidant partner. So you kind of have this dynamic happening where maybe there's more of a dominant in control partner that's sort of, I will say, wearing the pants in the relationship, and you have the codependent that's like, oh, I need to, sort of defer my power to this person, give them my voice, not set any boundaries because, their needs are more important than mine, things like that. Does that answer your question, Tracy?
Yes, it does. I mean, I think it's interesting because I just wonder if people who are codependent, like in a relationship, are they then also codependent at work? And does that show up right away? Like, could you recognize codependency immediately? Or do people try and do they know they're codependent? They hide it? Or is codependence bad? Is it a bad thing? It's bad for the individual, right?
I would say it's not a good thing. It's an unhealthy behavior. This is where it's kind of an interesting situation because we're, talking about relationships, but work's kind of in a big area of mine too, because I focused a lot on that. I've had a lot of lessons in the work area, and codependency is actually like, I would say it's not healthy, and especially healthy team situations, because somebody might take on more work than they need to take on. They might say, oh yeah, I got it. And they're people pleasing, but they really don't have it. And they're killing themselves by working long hours, things like that. So like, I would say absolutely not healthy. And also I think that certain people, could abuse that, in higher up positions because they're like, wow, this person's taking on everything. Like they're doing all of it. So it's almost like it's kind of like feeding the monster, which it's really not healthy for anyone to be a codependent in a work environment. So hope that helps.
Yeah, that's so interesting particularly about the fact that people are likely have some of these behaviors, the codependency behaviors that would transcend just, not just one relationship. I have seen, I haven't had a lot of codependency experiences myself, but I have seen other people where you can see the codependency with a relationship with a friend, even with their own children. And it just kind of permeates their whole lives. So that's so interesting. But I do want to ask you a question, because one of the things I'm really fascinated about, the things that we've been uncovering in this podcast particularly, are along the lines of kind of societal or Hollywood pressure to find the one, these like the romance, the Notebook kind of things. I actually wrote a book. I wrote a memoir about the quest for finding the one, and just kind of what that was like in trying to find the one, because it's sort of an unrealistic quest in so many ways. And so I think about the movie, Jerry Maguire, right? And everybody knows this line, like, you complete me. And this whole idea that was so endearing, right? You complete me. And it was like, oh, everybody's heart melted. I want to find someone to complete me and stuff. But like, or we refer to, our partners or spouses or whatever as the other half. It's like somehow we are incomplete without these people. What are your thoughts on people who kind of, or that, not people, but just the mentality of you're not whole until you find someone to be with romantically?
I'm trying to think, do I do a filtered response, or do I just
No, and I'm going to interpret Lindsay's response first just by looking at her face. So
exactly.
She's pretty disgusted now with that idea.
Just let it loose. The only thing we ask is no real profanity. I had to sign something with Apple about that, but let it go. Let it go, Lindsay.
I mean, it's bullshit, and I think we all know that in our heart of hearts, right?
Yeah.
We know that, but I'm coming at you from the recovering codependent lens. And, unfortunately, like, those movies, those lines, they're all like, like, movies are made to help people feel different than what they're feeling, and so there's an aspect of that I really appreciate about film and movies, TV, those kinds of things. On the other hand, like, it's been propagated over and over and over again, and now it's just sort of this expectation in the world that we're going to find someone to complete them. I come from it from a very, I wonder if I've just swung my pendulum like the complete opposite direction, because I've been codependent for so long. And so what I've been learning about myself is that no one actually completes us. We complete ourselves, and we're the only ones that truly know ourselves, right? And so taking care of our needs, our health, physical health, our mental health, our hobbies, our social connections, all of that is what we can do for ourselves. And so my therapist, I always like to give him credit. He talks to me a lot about this. He says, Lindsay, we want to come from a place of want in our relationship, not need. And all of my friends are like, I don't understand why your therapist says that. We all need people. We're human beings. And I'm like, I get it. But from a codependence perspective, we really have to be protective of ourselves and our identities and our boundaries, because we're not wired that way. Like, it's almost like, I was thinking about this question. I really like this question because, I don't want to minimize what alcoholism is. People who are alcoholics and they have to, like, okay, I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm done drinking. And so they can walk away from the drink, right? Technically, they can walk away and not open up another bottle of wine ever again. However, for us, we in codependency, like, we still have relationships with people. Like, this is a relationship addiction issue, right? Where we're, being a chameleon in our relationships. We're not using our voice. We're basically like, whatever you want me to be, partner, I'm going to be it, right? And so we have to be really, really protective of ourselves and how we show up. So, I mean, again, I'm like, beautiful. I love, that movie was great when it came out. But yeah, I mean, I really attempt to tell all of the codependents that I talk to that we really need to refocus and reprioritize what that relationship means to us, and come from a place of, I want you in my life, but I don't need you in my life, because that helps set the tone for the independence of the individual.
So when you work with somebody, okay, they come to you and they're like, help me, I'm a codependent. Do they even recognize that they're codependent? Like, or they just like, I keep giving myself up, or how do
I
they?
work with people more so in a group situation. Like when I'm speaking, people will share their stories and things like that. I think that we all have aspects of codependency in us. I think like we can all relate somehow. Like everybody has issues sometimes. I don't say everybody, but we've all suffered from low self-esteem, self-worth. We've struggled with setting boundaries with people that we love. We've struggled to communicate those boundaries because we're worried about how that might come across or that might hurt our partner. In terms of, do they recognize, do they see? I think people fundamentally know something's not right, something's off. They've just been so used to not listening to themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Go ahead, Corey.
Oh, no, I was going to say, like, when people recognize something as off, I know there's that, well, I don't know, but like I've seen people who are codependent that feel like they are serving others, right? Like they are just the natural caretaker. There's like code words that are really positive for codependency, right? Like, and so I'm, part of it, like, I'm wondering, is there, by kind of quote, giving up this codependency identity, they're giving up their caretaking, their service to others. I mean, how does that intersect, or does it?
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly right. There is some labels that are actually like martyr-like, right? Like, you're going out taking care of people. But it's not the same. Caretaking to like an obsessive level, caretaking to a place of, getting out of their way and letting them figure out their own lives, I think you can reframe caretaking for somebody that's like there's a lot of people that serve and do good things, but also have healthy boundaries and have a lot of respect. So I think you can kind of like, it's all within, the spectrum, but like the codependency is like on the extreme spectrum.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting because there are people who are service oriented. There are people who dedicate themselves to others or animals or something like that. And then so you said something just a couple of minutes ago about people changing themselves or whatever. My sister used to accuse me of that. Oh, you change every time you start dating somebody. And I've had 8 of the one. I've always been looking for the one. And I think I've had 8 to 10. Okay. I'll just say 8 to 10. I've been accused of loving, falling in love, whatever. But I really am devoted. When I fall in love, I'm devoted to that person. And I don't think that I change. I don't generally change who I am, but I will go with whatever they're doing. That's what my sisters accused me of. And it's happened most recently too. And that's what I'm trying to stop now, is that my life then becomes, I become very dedicated to that person and making sure that that person has everything that they need and that I can take care of everything and I can give them everything that they ever needed in their life. And I wouldn't call that codependent, but perhaps you would. Maybe.
Well, maybe more information, Tracy. I mean, and you don't have to divulge all the details. I think
I love to divulge details. Go ahead. Just no names.
Yeah, I mean, I think only you can answer that question for yourself,
whether I feel like I'm giving myself up.
Yes. Are you giving yourself away? Are you feeling like you're squandering aspects of yourself in order to support the relationship? I do think feedback from people who love us is really, really important. Sometimes we, don't want to hear it, or we have to take that with a grain of salt. They're only seeing you through a certain lens as well. I think only you can answer that question for yourself. And maybe there are pieces and parts that maybe you want to, slowly pull back a little bit of, just so that you do feel like you're showing up fully. I think that the feedback is good. It's okay, that's interesting feedback. Now, how do I feel about that? Checking in.
Well, again, this comes into my whole theory about people needing kind of counseling when they first get together, or at least a check, at least if they're not going to do couples counseling right away, right? Let's make sure we have a healthy relationship, that each person is kind of doing that work themselves or looking at themselves. I don't think I'm codependent. I become like energized by the relationship, but I do then do double the amount of things that I was doing, like just, previously prior to that. And I suddenly become interested in everything they're doing, and I will make their life like great, right? Even if they're not reciprocating, it's just my way. But I never,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, it sounds like it's coming from a genuine place, not a place of, like, fear of abandonment.
Right.
Like maybe that could be a question, like, oh, I'm worried that they're going to leave, so I'm going to overinvest in this relationship, or I'm going to give too much because I want to make sure that my place in this relationship is solid. And it's not about them, it's about you. And so I guess that would be maybe like something to ask yourself.
That's a great clarification. And I think that, yet when you say feedback is good from friends, I do take a lot of feedback in, and then I put it through my own process, and I take what, works. But it is interesting. I think that that's key, right, to codependence. Are you the person losing yourself? Like, is this becoming bad? But if you are codependent, do you know that? Do you know that you're losing yourself? It's hard to see, right?
I didn't.
Yeah.
I spent many years spinning around and appeasing, people pleasing, deferring power, decision making. I didn't make any decisions without my spouse. Very just lacked my own confidence in who I was. Even as a mother, it's like I questioned if I was even a good mother, like at times. And even today, like I've evolved so much, but there's, something, something will happen with my kids and somebody will say, you're a really good mom. And I'm like, you think so? Like, I feel like I don't even, so that's why it's so important, the belief about ourselves and really checking in and saying, you know what? Yeah, I am a good mom. So I can say with full certainty that I had no awareness that I was doing this myself.
So like I'm thinking in your case, or, even Tracy, if you want to interpret this in your case, is like, is it typical for one partner to be codependent and the other one to sort of be the dominant one? Or are there cases where there are two people that are codependent and that they just sort of lose themselves in each other? And these are the ones that kind of go off into hiding, and, you don't see them because they're just all about each other and nothing else. And all of a sudden both parties are getting like, well, you never come to, game night anymore or whatever. Or is it mostly just one person sort of gives it up for the other?
Yeah. It's kind of reading in between the lines there with that question. And I was thinking about that, like the whole idea of two codependents coming together. It's like, it just sounds like there's two leprechauns going through the yard. I'm like, oh no, really? I've never seen that before. Like I would say it's very rare to see that. I think that first analysis of dominant and more of a timid, more passive, deferring power combination works really, really well, And I don't talk about narcissists. A lot of people in the codependency space do. I think that, again, that they're out there. I just don't address it a lot because I don't necessarily like to focus on the other person and what I'm talking about. It's all about what am I doing for myself and how can I take care of me and make the best decisions for me. So yeah, like narcissist, codependent, like match made in heaven, like you just keep repeating the same dynamic, the push and the pull and feeling not good enough. And then that person's in the power. So it's just like, ooh. Yeah.
So like, what do you do at the beginning? So you're at the beginning of a relationship and you're finding yourself becoming codependent, whether that's something that you would normally do or not in this relationship. Like, what can you do at the beginning stages to sort of create some more equilibrium so that your relationship is off to a good start?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I think that one, having an awareness, if you're a codependent person, it's really important. I mean, that's really the first start. Like if you're in a new relationship and you're like, oh my God, I'm also codependent. It's like, it's like, what can you do? It's like, you really love this person. You're really excited about this person. I think that checking in, just like Tracy was talking about, it's like, wait, am I like over invested in this relationship? Am I not? Like, who was I before this relationship versus now? Are my friends saying anything different to me about this? So I think that those are all really, I'm glad that Tracy brought that up. I would say, if it's possible, to slow things down a little bit. Codependents have a typical response in getting into relationships. A lot of times, especially if that dominant, and codependent kind of come together in a relationship, sometimes that feels very familiar and very exciting. And, like it's just all the energy and you're jumping right in. And so that's one of the things that I would recommend is that if you're in the early stages of a relationship, maybe slowing that down, maybe not moving in together, maybe seeing each other a couple times a week. Like,
what? You're talking to two lesbians. Okay. Let me just back up there, lady.
Hey, I hear you. Are you, let me,
what?
okay.
We like to move in together right away. Okay. And we were told by a lesbian matchmaker, slow it down, people. And I'm like, what? I don't know what you're talking about.
I think I listened to that episode and I'm like, spot on.
Right.
We can't, it's not in our DNA.
But it's good though, because you're giving us yet another reason to slow it down, right? I mean,
slow it down, and especially on the physical intimacy. I know. That's a hard one too. But really take time to get to know this person, right? Who is this person? You just met them, you. I mean, I don't know how quickly we're talking about early in a relationship. If we've been dating 3 months and now we're official.
So we're talking days. Okay.
Okay, days. Oh, down. Yeah.
Well, I have a personal example here. I mean, I have a lot of personal examples of this. I'm the fast train, right? Until now, because I've been burned twice in the last 2 years by very avoidant people. And so I have some flirtations happening, and friends, including, Corey, will be like, when are you going to see this person? When are you going to do something in person? And I'm at the point, I'm like, I don't want to. Like, I need to take it slow, because like texting now or, doing things, I don't want to get physical anymore until I know that person. And this is the polar opposite of how I used to be, because bam, physical right away. And I've seen how that has led me down some pretty rocky paths, because I didn't wait. I didn't get to know the person, and it was disastrous, to say.
Well, and you went from like 0 to 60. You went from like the Tracy, the single,
can't help it, right?
Right, the single Tracy who played pickleball at night. You did like, your Netflix shows and walked your dogs in the morning, and then it was like within 2 days of being with someone, you're like doing totally different things. So like,
because I'm like devoted to that person. Like, I'm devoted to. I still kept up my pickleball, thank you. But yes, it's true. Like, it's like an elixir. And I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about in this season. It's like, we started out and I said, Corey, I don't want to talk about falling in love. It's gross. I'm just falling in love with myself, vomit. And then I start talking and I just it's like I get sucked into a trance. It's like I could now thinking of it, I'm just getting so excited again. I'm like, oh, I need to throw my rules out the window and just go. But the rules are helping me. So are there like rules you can institute to yourself to look, if I'm going to date, if I'm going to go out there and do this, what do I need to keep? Like, what do I need to do? Boundaries.
Well, yeah. I think Corey's spot on. It's like, walking the dog, pickleball, all the things that make Tracy Tracy. I think that is, you want to keep those things, and also like pepper in the new thing, but also just take your time. I'll be frank with you too. I had like one of these whirlwind things like a few months ago. Met this great person. I was like, yes, and like it was chemistry off the hook and everything was really, really good. I heard some of the clues but I chose to be like, oh, it's okay. Again, like,
Mm-hmm.
how am I expected to find a partner that respects me if I'm not respecting myself and honoring the information that I'm hearing isn't congruent with who I am and my values, right? But I just dove right in. And then like 30 days later, I'm just like, I'm literally on the floor. I'm like, what the heck happened to me? It was over. It was done with. Exactly who, was presented to me revealed itself, So that's sort of my big takeaway from my summer fling was that just slow down, take time. And also listen to yourself. The body too, I feel is one of those, you like to move your body, Tracy, but like also like sitting with yourself, like if there's any ailments, if you're tired, if your stomach's upset or bothering you, like basically your body is telling you something's off, right? Or something's not working out. And I think we tend to, when we're kind of feeling this really, amazing elixir, as you said,
Right.
tend to like just be drinking that and like, oh yeah, everything else is good.
Right.
So that would be I wouldn't call it a rule. I would just say it's self-honoring to slow down.
So what about if we took it to the extreme, like the other direction, like when you're like, I want to have my independence, right? And it becomes so, the independence isn't interdependence, right? Like you're almost leading like parallel lives, or, you might see this with married couples who've been together for a long time where they literally have their own lives next to each other. And they aren't even at least even a little bit invested in each other. And I wonder about that because, I've entered into, a relationship in the past couple of years, and I was very mindful about having a lot more independence than I have before, but I wanted to be really careful to not be disconnected, right? Like not overdo it and be like, well, we can only see each other like this many times a week. And so how do you balance that, right?
Yeah. I think with just communication, I think that, we too, codependents, especially if they're, recovering self-aware codependents, like you just said, it's like, you have a few relationships where you've self-sacrificed and, haven't taken care of yourself. And so when you get into a new relationship, again, like that pendulum just swings the other way. It's like, well, by God, I'm going to keep all the stuff I've got going on and I'm going to be me and you can't break me. I had actually a really good post relationship after my divorce. It was secure. It was relatively healthy. Like I was like, hey, I'm codependent. I got issues. Like I want you to know. And he's like, cool. Like that's awesome. And let's talk about it. And I think that's really, really important that you just have really good communication. But I did in that relationship, I just was like, okay, like you do that and I do this. And like, it was very, and it was okay, but it was just like, I think you just have to strike a healthy balance between independence and togetherness, right? So it's essential for couples to be communicating often and regularly about the needs and expectations and priorities. So, that sounds like I don't know, like a textbook response, but I really think that's true. But I think we do as codependents sort of overcompensate for that independence because we're fearful that somebody's going to hijack it again and take it away from us.
Yep, exactly.
Well, I think, in society, I keep making this point. It's like we don't get the modeling, we don't get the understanding. People, poo-poo therapy and stuff like that. But really, therapy is about getting to know yourself, right? And like it seems like this codependence, you had an awareness, and you don't have to tell us the watershed moment. But was there a point where you just wanted to know yourself? Like, did you feel like you just didn't know yourself?
Yeah, I think I was always self-seeking and I would find like the thing, right? Like I would try to find, I got the job, oh, I got the job, and then I'd be in the job and I'd be like, oh, still not good. Something's not right. Oh, it's the marriage. Oh, and like, I start kind of, peeling back the layers of all of my dissatisfaction. I'm just a constant seeker. And but I got to a point where I was like, I can only like read so many books. Like I need help. Like I can't, like I guess I self-identify with having a warped sense of, views on love and relationship because I wasn't programmed properly, if that makes sense. And so the only way for me to kind of correct that is to have a therapist, have someone with a different perspective than mine that can see the situation clearly. So yeah, I mean, it was sort of my aha moment. I was driving, I'll tell you, I was driving in the car to my new job 5 years ago, and I was listening to a podcast, and I was listening to this, therapist talk about codependency, and he spoke about how a lot of people, when you ask people, generally speaking, you ask them, hey, do you like yourself? And most people are like, yeah, I like myself. Most people don't. That was his thing. He's like, most people don't like themselves. And if they don't like themselves, they can't trust themselves. And if they don't trust themselves, they can't love themselves. And I was like, oh God, like, I don't like myself. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And so that was the moment for me. And actually I emailed him and said, can you be my therapist? Because that was the moment for me that, really turned on the light bulbs.
See,
and
that's why podcasts are so good. Podcasts change your life.
Yeah. And the podcast changed my life. Also commitment to myself. I'm sure, we all have things we do for ourselves, right? And so a journaling practice and a yoga practice, meditation, like we all have, and hobbies that we enjoy, like that all folds into, the identity and the people that we are and the humans that we are. So I didn't have that before.
When
are you happier? Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, when you were talking about the having your thing, one of the things that I had was I walk every day. And when I got with my new partner, it's been about 2 years now, but it was like, I'm going to walk every day. Like that's something you just need to know.
Yes.
Like, and sometimes you're invited, but sometimes I want to walk with other people, or sometimes I want to go by myself, or just talk on the phone with Tracy, or just listen to music. And I'm going to do this every day. And this is part of who I am. And I mean, it's been well received. And so it's like, no matter what happens, even if we're traveling, it's like Corey needs to get her walk in because that's part of like what's important to her. And so for me, as we're talking about finding that thing, it was like, for me, it made sense to find like a tangible thing that I could hold on to. So when you say like getting those boundaries, for me, a boundary was very clear. I needed to do about an hour and a half walk every day. And that was a really clear boundary. And so I can measure whether I'm doing it or not and holding true to myself.
And it's very simple, right? It doesn't have to be a big elaborate thing. And I think that's important to set like a small boundary at first too. I think that really important for people who are feeling uncomfortable about doing so. Well, what's something simple that, hey, if I can just do this every day or whatever, that I can actually follow through on and feel like I've got a little piece of myself. I'm starting to build that and reclaim that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think about our listeners being able to find something small like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's diving in and being like challenging codependency head on might be kind of scary, but finding something that's kind of a non-negotiable, I mean, I know for Tracy, one of those things was pickleball, and like that was really important to her. And, for me, it's walking, or it may be not physical. Maybe it's just an hour every night to read or something, but not being able to be convinced to give that up to do something else and then feel like you're at a loss. And so to me, that was a really great, tangible thing.
Do you know what my non-negotiable is?
What?
That I do whatever I want. And that is my non-negotiable. And I just took a trip, and it was the best trip of my life because I did whatever I wanted. I was me. I had my own car. Even though I saw family and friends, I did whatever I wanted. And I think that's important. And that was my question for you, Lindsay. Are you happier? Are you happier now?
Yeah, I am. I'm a lot happier. Yeah. It's interesting. It's complicated. Life is complicated as you do the work. You think that you're going to, somehow create and get to some kind of arrival point. But what I'm learning is that you actually don't get to any arrival. It's just a new suitcase full of learnings that you've got to like pick up, unpack, look at, things like that. So yes, happier, and also like, live in a human existence.
You're more complex. Like your life is richer. That's what I've said to the two people I dated who were not doing therapy and stuff. And one said, well, if I do this, I'm going to be in the fetal position for, whoever knows how long. And I said, you will be for a little bit. And then I promise you, all of your relationships will be richer.
Yes.
And, going back now and hanging out with somebody that I was with 10 years ago, and to be told to work through an issue, to have and work through some old dynamics, we did it totally differently, and it's richer for it. And do I regret having moved on from that life? Yes and no, because all of the stuff that has happened since has given me such a different perspective and enriched my life so much. And I feel like for people that are scared, and I think codependency maybe is rooted in fear, is like, oh, I can't do this. It's like, step out of that. Look at the pain that's within yourself. I've done it. You've done it. Corey's done it. It is really hard, but honest to God, it will change your life, because there is complexity in that. And that pain is there, whether we choose to recognize it or not. So why don't we recognize it, address it, embrace it? And I used to call it the ugly baby doll that you carry around with you, and you have to look at it sometimes, but it's always there with you. It's there with you, whether you like it or not. So why not give it some attention?
That's really well put, Tracy.
The ugly baby doll. Corey hates that
analogy. I don't like I can't do the ugly baby doll freaks me out.
I mean, that was humorous. I liked it, but then I liked what you were talking about, the complexity piece. I was like, yes.
You had me until I envisioned like this dirty, raggedy Anne that I'm holding from my childhood.
No, it's that you have this, it's your inner child, right? My therapist used to try to get me to do inner child work. And I'm like, lady, you are creeping me out. No. And then I was able to outsource it because I encountered 3 children being abused out in the world, like just presented in front of me, where I intervened on the behalf of the child. And I was like, this is me doing my inner child work, is helping me. And a relationship I recently had brought me back to that. And that's what I'm saying. If we don't look at ourselves, if we don't see what's within us, we're stunted, I think.
Yeah. Well, exactly. We're all there. There's so much potential in us, right? Of who we are and what we're meant to do here, and, it's kind of, I look at my life and I try to like not dwell on this, but there was a long period of my adult life that was squandered, and so now that's a beautiful story now, right? But like, yes, there's so much to flourish, to grow for that richness. I totally agree with you.
So, Lindsay, it sounds like there's a couple different levels of things here as takeaways that I'm hearing, and maybe you can kind of fill in for us. But what it sounds like is, there's kind of the really deep work, right? Where does this codependency potentially come from? Looking at our childhood, looking at trauma, looking at past relationships, whatever that might be, to unpack kind of why it is that we seek codependency as a way of dealing with fear or loss or abandonment issues. And then kind of on the more surface level or the day-to-day level might be something around creating actual physical or emotional boundaries. It could be slowing things down. It could be slowing down the physical nature of things. It could be saying, hey, I need an hour a day to do my watercolor painting, something that's kind of more tangible. Do I have that right? And B, what might be some other takeaways for our listeners when we think about like, how do they start?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's great. I love how you I was just like, I can tell you've got the professor going on because you just like summarized that really, really well. I'm like, okay, I like that. Also I'm stalling because I'm like, what else do I want to say? I'm a huge fan of therapy. I honestly, like if you have access to therapists, I know there's a lot of different ways to go about doing that. There's also Al-Anon if you struggle with drug and alcohol addiction in your family. That's a great place to go. There's a lot of great resources there. You can't do it by yourself. You can't heal from codependency on your own. So find someone to help you with that. That would be a key takeaway. That would be the takeaway. Really, really important.
Excellent. Yes. Tracy always tells me I'm a professor. And that's why I have to open and close the show because I can preface and summarize. It's taken me like 25 years to learn how to do that. But
we have a nice interdependent relationship and she does it because if not, this would be the most chaotic show that ever was. And so we need Corey's brain to keep it. I'm already in like 12 different directions, but Corey's like She's got it. She's got the outline. She's got in her head. She's going to summarize it, and then she's going to wrap it up.
Love
Exactly.
it. You guys make a great team.
You make a great team.
Yes. Well, and Lindsay, you summarized it even better than I did. So just recognizing and seeking help is really what's most important. And, finding your way back to yourself. I mean, that's
to
the ultimate goal.
yourself.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because
Finding
you as an
yourself.
infant, I think, infants probably love themselves. And then, oh my gosh, everything that happens to them just kind of diminishes that. What do I say? It like dims their light, life kind of dims people's light. And I think like for me over 53 now, I don't want that anymore. I don't want anyone dimming my light ever again. I just want to do what I want to do and to be in the world in the way I want to be in the world, not how somebody else wants me to be.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, Lindsay, where can our listeners find you? What kinds of things do you offer? Do you do any kind of coaching, therapy? Do you do classes? What is on your horizon of the things that you do?
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm like a regular person that has like a 8 to 5 job Monday through Friday. But I also have a podcast called Unstuck on You. So you can, anywhere you listen to your podcast, you can look that up. My website's also unstuckonyou.com. So, I'm really kind of doing the speaking engagements lately. I've been talking to a lot of workplaces about codependency in the workplace. But yeah, I'm going to be putting out some new episodes on the podcast. So yeah, just, happy to connect with anyone who might be interested in talking.
Awesome.
Excellent. Fantastic. We'll make sure to put all of that stuff in the show notes and, so our listeners can get a hold of you. So again, thank you, Lindsay, for being on here and having such a great conversation. Tracy, thank you for all of your insight and the resurgence of the ugly baby doll that
the emotional Chucky.
I think, wasn't it? It was like 4 seasons ago was the last time we talked about the ugly baby doll.
Yeah. And you had the same face when I brought it up.
Thank you for bringing it back up. I feel complete. You complete me, right? Just kidding. All right. Anyways.
Codependency jokes, Corey. Too soon. She's not even off the podcast yet. Jeez, let her get off the show.
No, I love that.
All right. Well, again, thank you. Thank you so much. And to all of our listeners, until our next episode, go out there and rock those relationships. If you liked what you heard, check out our show notes for resources from today's episode. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram under Rock That Relationship and go to our website at rockthatrelationship.com for updated episodes and more great information.
Thanks for listening. Now go rock those relationships.